Greetings. Chapter 8, the last chapter in your textbook, The Future of Hate, kind of summarizes the entire course and also provides some ideas for future research. One of the problems that we clearly see is that we lack a lot of research. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and this is not only in regards to the extent of hate crimes and victimization, but also regarding our research in terms of prevention. We always want to ask, how can we prevent hate crimes from occurring in the first place? And also ask, what are some of the best ways to address hate crimes when they do occur, so they don't occur again? And so we run into the research problems. For example, if we look at hate crime perpetrators, we're still trying to figure out more specifics. We know, for example, that many of the perpetrators are males in their teens or young adult years and are usually not affiliated with any organized hate groups. We realize that there are some typologies that are helpful, but I think we also want to begin to look at some more specific factors that seem to lead someone to engage in hate crime. So I want to ask, what factors determine who commits hate crimes and who doesn't? And we also want to study in greater detail hate crime victims. And we want to, first of all, know the extent. Remember, our statistics that we have on the amount of hate crimes that occurs in the United States is terrible. It's bad. I mean, we have such so many problems with lack of reporting, and that is remember, we saw earlier, and I think it's mentioned in this chapter as well, a large majority of those reporting police departments report no crimes, hate crimes occurring. We know that's not reality. So the true nature and number of hate crime victims remains unknown, and also we need to focus more attention on the victimology aspects. Also, we want to know what works. That we have hate crime legislation in most states, but we're not quite sure if they work or not. And we're not quite sure about what types of prevention programs work. And so we run into those problems as well. Certainly, we need to obtain more funding for research and encourage others to research hate crimes. And we do have some well-established studies that we can use as models for future research. And we also need to work with policymakers that may not know about the research, or may not be interested, or maybe, for example, I haven't figured out how to have a good relationship with a policymaker at the local level to provide that person information for decision making based on science rather than what their friend told them or their neighbor or what they thought sounded logical. Because we know sometimes something that seems like it would make sense really doesn't when we uncover the research, or we find that some variable that was hidden or we didn't expect ends up being important. And also, studying hate crimes, coming up with interventions, means that we have to deal with very complex issues. Also, your author mentions better data collection, and certainly we're moving in the right direction with our Hate Crime Statistics Act and the collection of data, but we still have a lot to do. Of course, some steps that can be taken are described in your textbook, but certainly, if we had mandatory reporting and we had some standardization and we had a better data collection system, we'd know a lot more. Also, your author talks about work with police and prosecutors in regards to additional training and providing law enforcement officers and prosecutors with the resources they need to adequately investigate, understand, and prosecute basically hate crimes. And so we are seeing things improve here. That seems to be the case, with some police departments having special task forces or units that focus on hate crime, and some departments having someone that works in the department that has studied hate crimes, taken courses, and also trains others and supervises others in the department. I know that a lot of law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices take hate crimes very seriously, but we need to make sure that that adequate training is available, and also that the resources are provided. That I think, for example, law enforcement officers that take this course, I think you've really have a lot more knowledge and information than many people, not only in law enforcement, but in the prosecutor's office, in the politician's office. You have a lot more knowledge now, and hopefully can share that with your colleagues. And so even as I mentioned, this is the first time the fall semester 2018 that I taught this course. I would say I'm about 15 years. I should have had this course running 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even. That I'm glad I got this course running now. We're going to keep running it in the future, but I wish I had put it together earlier. There's all kinds of reasons, that it didn't get going earlier, but I wish that I had this going, 10, 15 years ago. But I'm glad it's going now, and I hope others, will teach it in other departments and universities. Also, we'll take a close look at legislation and the different laws, and what seems to work and what doesn't, or what we know works or doesn't work is still very questionable. And of course, we have to look at the relationships between the lobbying efforts of advocacy groups and different proposals, and how that materializes. Also, involved in that is looking at groups that are protected by hate crime laws and groups that are not. Also, the use of civil actions to deal with hate crimes, and also legislation focusing on law enforcement. And as I mentioned, I've seen a lot more training available for law enforcement, and law enforcement getting much more skilled and knowledgeable about investigating and preventing hate crimes from occurring. And then, of course, the author brings in globalized hate, which is an ongoing problem now with rapid communication and social media, and different chat groups and organized websites and the like. We see that the international connections are strong and have become very problematic. And of course, we have to provide the support and training for our criminal justice professionals, especially our law enforcement professionals, to be able to monitor what's going on online. What I've seen going on online really rattles my brain in terms of the changes I've seen just over the years. One advantage of being an old man is that I got to watch all these changes occur. Of course, my responsibility is to try to figure out, well, what can we do to reduce social problems, to reduce the prejudice, reduce the hatred that's going on online, while at the same time, protecting what would be free speech rights, and where do we draw the line, and how does that materialize and work? So technology is definitely a big deal now. And then fighting hate, how do we prevent? And some of the areas discussed by your author is focusing on young people, especially since they're the ones who probably commit most of the hate crimes. And of course, preventing that from occurring in the first place would be beneficial. So there, is an attempt to look at what seems to work to decrease the risk for engaging in hate crimes, what kind of programs, what kind of activities. Also, we need to look at bias in state institutions. There are certain institutions in our society, certain organizations that actually create more problems and encourage hate than encourage reduction. And also focusing on prejudices in society, and we've talked about that as well. Bigotry reducing programs and ideas and methods. And again, if you haven't seen some of this going on online, I'm not sure if you have much. If you don't have an expansive network. But I see stuff all the time, and it's quite disturbing. And I don't have to go far, just looking at different things on Facebook feeds, Twitter feeds, and so on. I'll give you an example. In my community, I was looking up, I was doing some searches and looking up some stuff, and I was quite surprised. My intent wasn't to look at hate in my community, but it was not hard to find online. Anyway, there's still a lot of work to do, and I'm extremely thankful that you chose to take this course as an elective. Thank you.